Welcome to Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
So Greg, what is your shirt? What's your shirt say? I'm assuming that that's relevant.
Yes, I'm an instructor with the National Cave Rescue Commission. I'm also the Northeast Regional Coordinator. The NCRC is a officially standing commission of the National Speleological Society. We're charged with basically training, promoting cave safety, cave rescue, and also interacting with local agencies.
The RPI Outing Club.
I think, and maybe I'm misstating this, but I think that you got involved with caving at RPI.
Basically, yes. I'd done one or two caves before I got to RPI, but since then, RPI is what really got me into it.
Yeah. So I did some spelunking at RPI as well, but it was just a little bit of fun when I was with the Outing Club. It was awesome. I loved it, but I didn't pursue it after college. I know.
So back up. What's it like?
I'm the only person that's never been caving. So like, what does one experience? And I know that there's no one simple answer to that question, but.
Sure. That's a great question. And I'm going to give you a complex answer.
Okay.
One of the advantages I've had with being an NCRC instructor is I have the opportunity to teach across the country. My background, for example, was taken in Indiana 2 years ago. I've also taught in Oregon in lava tube caves, down south in some of the deep caves down there, in Puerto Rico. And the reason I mention all that is because all those caves are extremely different. New York caves are kind of known for being kind of smallish, definitely wet, and we always say dark. And when we're out in Oregon and they're giving us the lowdown on the caves there, the local instructor's like, oh, and the caves here are very dark. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I get that. They're caves, there's no light. What I didn't really realize till I got in there, for example, is here in the East, almost every cave is limestone. So even when it's muddy, its albedo is actually, some number, don't ask me what it is.
Yeah.
But out there, it's basalt, it's lava tubes. It really is dark. I mean, the walls just absorb your light. So a light that might work here, out there, suddenly you're not seeing as much. But in terms of the experience, I think it is different for everybody.
Syllabary. And yes, I had to look that up.
Cherokee Nation member who has been researching the Syllabary, how do you say that? Syllabary in the caves. Some of his ancestors, basically a century or more ago, especially during the Trail of Tears, were hiding in caves or not just hiding in caves. They used the caves as part of their spiritual life and were leaving imageries in there. And some of the caves actually have some of the early Cherokee writing in there.
Wow.
So he was going to caves purely because he was honoring his ancestors. And I go into caves because it's kind of cool. It's one of the few places where, not myself, I don't do this so much, but I have friends, you can go where nobody's ever been before. I have friends going out to Wind Cave in South Dakota, which is now, I think, the third longest cave in the world, who literally, it takes them 2 days or so to get to where they start exploring. And I believe there's over 300 miles of cave there. It's 200, I have to remind myself. And they're finding, brand new cave all the time. So some do it for exploration. I do it because there's a certain sense of, I can't say, I'm not saying touch with nature because there's not much nature underground, but you get a different feel for things, a different perspective for things.
More about outing clubs.
Syracuse has a very great outing club, and they do a lot of caving in this area.
What is this outing club you guys keep talking about? Like there's various outing clubs and I've never even heard of them. What are these?
So a lot of colleges, and this RPI was, I think, one of the first 5 in the nation. I wanted to say 1920 something, started, they call them outing clubs or outdoor clubs, where they basically started going outside, doing activities off campus. In fact, one of the things that attracted me to RPI was the strong student union that it had and the outdoor club. And so literally our club here, and I don't know what the worth of the equipment is, but has a very large room that is stock full of equipment, half dozen canoes, all sorts of lamps for caving, backpacks, ground pads, literally tens of thousands of dollars of equipment, skis. So basically the club here, in fact, their first meeting is tonight. They'll do hiking trips, they'll do rock climbing trips, ice climbing trips, whitewater trips, rafting trips, kayak, canoe, caving, obviously. If it's not, since I graduated, they started doing mountain biking trips, for example. So they do quite a bit of outdoors. If Syracuse has a great program, and it's varies in how popular it is. But again, in the 20s, there was a group called the Intercollegiate Outing Club Association, which was basically a group of that was mostly in the Northeast that would get together and plan trips. And they did this for two reasons. One was basically, hey, we don't have the equipment. You've got equipment. Let's go together. For example, I took the McGill Outing Club caving years ago because they didn't have much equipment or experience. We've done stuff with other colleges. And quite frankly, back in the 20s and 30s, well, RPI would do a square dance trip with Smith College because that's how you got to meet other people, because both colleges were, single sex colleges. And so it was also a social thing of that. And outing clubs actually have a very strong tradition of square dancing. For that reason.
Spelunking. What a great word.
And does anyone call it spelunking anymore?
Now, again, it's one of those tensions. Is some people are like, well, spelunking is what amateurs do. Caving is what real people do.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm a spelunker then.
Yeah, well, no, there's people starting to push back on that because, again, you're creating an artificial divide, and maybe we wanted to know spelunkers in the caving. So rather than mock them, say that. And honestly, spelunking has a long history that apparently its original definition was a little more favorable than it is now.
Yeah.
But if you get a chance, I can find it. There's a great Calvin and Hobbes where Calvin throws a stone into the water and goes spelunk, and he says to Hobbes, "See, spelunking's not so hard."
Caving and COVID.
Well, I was just wondering if caving increased in popularity over the time of COVID.
No, if anything, it's just the opposite.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, one of our real concerns last year. What's that?
I said it's indoors.
Actually, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Viruses tend to like cool, moist places, which is what caves are. So a lot of cavers really just stopped caving, not just because of the danger of COVID, but honestly, within the NSS and among us cavers, we were saying, please think twice about caving, because if you get injured, now you're putting us at risk.
Chimney Mountain, a great cave.
I have a question about maybe changes you've seen in caves over the last 30 some odd years. Have you noticed anything that's shifted in nature? Yes.
Best example I can think of that, and it's, by the way, it's a great hike if you've never done it, is Eagle Mountain up in the Adirondacks. It's not one of the high peaks, but it's a gorgeous view. Has this great, Chimney Mountain has a great cave called Eagle Cave in it. And I had not been in there since college, and about, I think it was 4 years ago, local Boy Scout camp said, hey, we'd like you to take our scouts caving once a week. So it's like, great, yeah, you get to go. And you hike up, I think it's semi-steep. Most of the Boy Scouts thought it was extremely steep, except for the Boy Scout troop from the White Mountains that thought it was just a warm-up hike. They're the only group I could not keep up with, literally. But the cave is unusual because it's near the top of the mountain. And most caves in New York are what we call solutional. Basically, water seeps through the limestone, creates weak carbonic acid, eats away the stone, and forms passages. This one is not that at all. Literally, the side of the mountain just kind of fell away. So I like to say the first room is about 60 feet tall and 60 feet wide. Unfortunately, it's sloped like this, so it's really, never more than 10 feet anywhere along that slope. But you climb down that, go down a rope, and you go into this huge chamber. Then you go down some more, and you eventually get into something called the ice room. And when I was there in college, even late into the fall, the floor was covered with ice. The first time I went in there was amazing. We entered this room, and the floor is perfectly flat, which is unusual in caves, but it's because it's ice, obviously. And the ceiling was just covered with crystals. And on the far side of the room, there was this little crack with kind of ice going down. We actually came back later, I think it was next year, we came back with crampons, ice screws, and some rope, and hiked up the mountain, carried that into the cave, and went down there and found out it doesn't go in place. Unfortunately, the ice is all gone now.
Ice is all
And
gone. Man.
there's the suspicion that others have, and I share it, and I think we've kind of came up with it independently, is now when you go into the room, and twice I've gone into this room and did not recognize it because it just looks so different. The ice wasn't there, the floor is much lower,
Yeah.
and there's the sand crawl that goes down and eventually peters out, but you can feel a slight draft. And what we suspect happened was just a particularly warm year. The ice melted just low enough that the air started flowing through, and as soon as the air flowed through, it brought more warm air in, and it just disappeared. And I do think this is directly attributable to global warming. Same thing with the snow hole. You'd go there as late as August and find snow at the bottom, and now maybe July if you're lucky, but usually even by June it's very little left there. So yeah, we're definitely seeing a climatic impact on our caves.
White nose syndrome.
So white nose syndrome is first found in House Cave, which was related to House Cavern about, God, I want to say 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a fungus, and I'll try to find the name of the fungus for you to add, that basically gets on the nose and mouth and the wings of the bat. And it appears what it does, it disturbs their hibernation cycle. So they wake up in the middle of winter looking for food, and of course there is no food. And when they first found it, what they were finding was 90 to 99% mortality rate in some of the caves.
Huge.
And this is, a lot of people are like, oh, bats. Well, we need bats. Bats help control our insect population. And this is honestly a health issue, because keeping the insect population down is a safety issue. And quite honestly, as we're starting to see some of these insect-borne diseases come north, is it Zika virus and stuff like that?
Yeah.
We want to keep these down. Up in Vermont, there was a bat herbinucleum that, again, mortality rate was literally in the thousands and thousands of bats. I've seen photos of it, and it's tragic. So one of the things that has changed, for example, is we don't allow caving from October 1st through May 1st. Again, the goal is to keep people out of the cave so that we don't disturb the bats. This fungus does appear to have come from Europe, where they don't have this problem. And this suspicion is basically the bats there probably a couple hundred years ago were wiped out by it, built up immunity and evolution in action and survival of the fittest. So we're hoping that will occur in the United States. But it may be decades before we regain the bat population that we used to have.
Carlsbad Caverns.
If you're familiar with Carlsbad Caverns out in New Mexico, the way it was found, and the Carlsbad Caverns is interesting because it's actually kind of, you have to go up to the top of the mesa before we can go descend into it. It was literally found by a young, I wouldn't say boy, I think it was a young teenager who was, I think, shepherding sheep or something like that, and literally saw a black cloud like leave the mountain. Literally, there were millions of bats. Now, mostly because of human trepidation and everything like that, it's down to thousands. But if you go there, try to go towards evening, because they have a huge amphitheater that you can sit in. And if you time it right, all the swallows come back in from the day, and then all the bats will come back out.
CO2 in caves.
You also mentioned tracking CO2 in caves, and I know that was not about a climate change tracking, but a curiosity about the air in caves. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a friend of mine who's a fellow instructor, Amir Mirza, and again, I'll find the link for this, has been doing this.
We're giving you all kinds of homework. There's
that's fine. You'll have to remember what my homework is, though, because I'm not writing this down. But
it's okay.
He has been in Indiana, where there's also a lot of caves, because the limestone there has been tracking CO2 levels in caves. So we've gone in, or he's gone into a lot of caves. And when he was out here for an event, I took him and my son into Knox Cave, which has is known for something called the gun barrel, which Lauren can look up later.
I know that.
Yeah, well, now you can bypass it. You don't have to crawl through it anymore. It's been dug out. But there's a spot back there. He put the CO2 monitor in there, and it immediately started to alarm. And which was unusual. It was the highest CO2 level he'd measured in the cave to date. And what I found interesting about that is what CO2 does in the high levels or higher levels, it gives you a more panicked response. You start to hyperventilate a bit. You get a little more tense. And I'm thinking, this is one of the few times I can say it's not me. It actually is the cave. And some of this may be driven simply by pressure changes. Caves actually, we say they breathe. As the pressure outside changes, air will flow in or out of the cave. In the springtime, for example, the cave air is warmer than the outside air. So if it's flowing out, it'll create little condensation clouds. That's how some people find new caves. They look for these little whiffs of condensation. But also you get a certain amount of leaves falling into the cave or other biological activity. So he's curious, what impact does this have on the cave? Does it
Wow.
change
Yeah.
over the course of the year? And I have another friend, Dr. Sarah Truby, out of, I think she's in Arizona now. She's a fellow coordinator for the NCRC. She's been doing similar research on other gas and caves. Around here, it's mostly CO2, probably driven by water levels interacting with the limestone, maybe some breakdown with leaves. In Texas, for example, they have more methane in caves. It's a real concern that they have to watch for. And I have a couple of folks I've known who've done ice caves up in Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and one of the other peaks up there where they literally are going in the caldera where the ice is formed. There's passages that they map from year to year, and they change from year to year, but they're actual caves in the ice.
Wow.
And one of the things they find there actually is they get some pockets of CO2, and literally almost had an incident, or they had an incident which almost went worse, where someone tumbled down a slope, and CO2 is heavier than air. So they literally fell into a CO2 pocket and they had very little oxygen. And luckily they were able to get out. So now they actually, when they explore these ice caves, they'll actually carry a little bottle of supplemental oxygen. And sometimes they'll actually have little lasers on them. And that's kind of sci-fi thing where the laser swoops around the room. And literally when it hits the CO2 level will deflect slightly. So they know, hey, let's not go down into that part of the cave.
See, that's fascinating. That ties in. One of the healthy buildings studies is about CO2 and cognitive function. And so we'll share that study with you because that might be really interesting for that research. Fascinating.
That's a great example. There's a not experiment, but a trick that some cavers will say of, oh, to check your air, just take a lighter, and if it lights fine, or sometimes the flame will actually be about an inch above the lighter, or if carbide lamps, you can see that. And I've had one or two cavers say, yeah, what happens when the air quality gets that poor is you just kind of look at it and say, oh, that's kind of cool. That should mean something, but I can't remember what it's supposed to mean. So it's a useful test if you can recognize it, but apparently not everybody necessarily recognizes it. Another reason the cave in numbers, because more likely someone will say, hey, wait a second.
Yeah, that's not cool. Yeah. Let's get out of here.
And the wrap up.
I encourage folks who want to go caving, especially if they're local to this area. I will take them anytime that the caves are open. I always like to take beginners. And if you're not around here, go to the NSS website, which is caves.org, and look for a local grotto. And honestly, if the local grotto is a bunch of grumpy old folks saying, oh, no, we don't take beginners, no, find another grotto, because there are some great grottos out there that will take folks caving. And it really is a great sport. And I love it. I think it changes the way you look at the world and everything like that. And love to see more folks in caves safely.
Lauren's like this big, so she can go into any cave.
Not gonna lie, I don't know that I'm cut out. I don't know that I'm cut out for the cave life. So if Greg is a caver and you are a spelunker, I'm a person who looks at caves on Instagram.
There you go.
I'm not sure that I'm
step.
the type that needs to be in a cave. Are there snakes in caves?
I've only found one once, and unfortunately it was at the bottom of a deep pit, so we helped carry it out. And it was a little baby garter snake.
Oh.
Yeah, little one, baby.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was very, very kind of you. Bats, I'm cool with. Bats, spiders, insects, those are fine.
You're perfect then.
I don't know.
I really appreciate your time and your stories, Greg. This is awesome.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Your intelligence about, getting humans out there and in there and under there.
Well, thank you. We'll have to get together again sometime, Jody, since we're so close. And Lauren, maybe someday we can meet in person. And honestly, if you do want to try a cave, I got a great one locally that we can take you into. That's a great beginner cave.
Maybe we should maybe we ought to do that. No, seriously, I will do it. I will try.
Excellent.
Cool.
I think it would be a fun experience. So I will give it a shot. Right.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Good. It was great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thanks for joining us for Subject to Change.
On a bike.
All right. Thanks so much.
Be
Take
well.
care. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.